Hello, and welcome to Essential Ingredients. This is Justine Reichman. I'm so excited to be here today with you. I want to welcome our guests that tune in each week, but also welcome those new listeners, those new viewers that are tuning in for the first time. It's so great to have you here. I feel privileged to have you here to be joining this conversation. And this conversation today is with Connor. You're not going to want to miss this. It opened my eyes to the opportunities around vertical farming, both in an urban environment as well as in the countryside or in the suburbs. And I think that for me, growing up in New York, it never even entered my mind that I would be able to do some of these things. And it was so exciting to see this because as I moved to California and I was able to have that vegetable garden, for me, I still couldn't envision what that would look like in New York City in a high rise. So I invite you to stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss this. So, Connor, if you would, I'm so excited to have you here. We have guests each week that tune in. They tune in so that they can make better decisions. They tune in because they want to hear from you and what your story is and be inspired and equally better understand how we can make those more informed choices. So, for those guests and listeners who we are so grateful to have each week, would you please just give us a quick intro to you and Just Vertical?
Yeah, so Connor Tidd, I'm one of the two co-founders here at Just Vertical. And at Just Vertical, we build indoor gardens for your home, all the way up to full-scale indoor vertical farms that we put in around the world so that you can grow food locally, no matter what the climate is, what the weather is, and what the conditions are outside. So whether you're in a desert or you're above the frost line, you can have access to your own fresh food.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I know for me growing up in New York City, it didn't seem quite as accessible to have that garden, to understand how to grow it, to eat locally. I mean, aside from going to the Union Square farmers market, we were not necessarily eating locally. And it could also be, in all fairness, the timing, right? We're here in 2025. This is a much bigger conversation now than it was in the 1970s.
I think people were very concerned about local food and where it came from. You look back, World War II, everybody was growing a victory garden. It was almost like a point of pride part of the war effort. And then, you read a cookbook from like the 50s and 60s, and we all got obsessed with like Jello and cheap, accessible food. And there's all these weird recipes of like Jello and Cool Whip because those were the new things, which is gross now in the 2025 context. But you really saw that kind of fall off, and it was all about globalization and how do we get food as cheap as possible. And I think there's been a big resurgence in people wanting to know where their food's coming from, what's going into it, and that's where we see people, thinking about their seasonal diets, local, what's the impact of it, and that was kind of part of the genesis for us was, all right, you lived in New York City, I live in downtown Toronto, you're in a concrete jungle. How do you grow your own food? Like it's not an option, right? My balcony faces north. There's tall buildings all around me. I barely get anything. The community garden's got a 3-year wait list because people are obsessed with it. So it was like, okay, what if we could take a lot of the cool cutting edge science around vertical farming and put it into a piece of furniture? And, we can't quite grow everything. Like we don't do root vegetables. So potatoes and carrots, if you do grow them, they come out tiny, like smaller than a golf ball. But the things where freshness really matters, your lettuces, your leafy greens, your herbs are a huge one, cherry tomatoes. Most people, they bite into like a fresh cherry tomato in the middle of winter, and it's like night and day difference compared to what's at the grocery store.
It's true. It's true. And so, as I was learning a little bit about your indoor farming and the technology, I was seeing, and this is a big conversation here in California, that it uses a lot less water. And that's a big conversation in California, right? With the drought and everything. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that because from my understanding, I thought it was like 95% less. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's really cool. So the way the systems work, and this is one thing we're proud of, but it's not unique to to necessarily just our system, but it's a closed loop. So the water that goes into it gets pumped up to the plants, runs along the roots, and then whatever the plants don't want to drink at that time goes right back into a water reservoir, just a holding tank, and it constantly recirculates. So what that means is you don't have any groundwater runoff, you don't have any loss that way, and the tank's closed up so you don't even have evaporation out of it. And it also leads to not only way less water use, but way less fertilizer use. You use about a tablespoon of fertilizer every 2 weeks, which if anyone's ever used fertilizer in your garden, like that's going nowhere. Like that's,
Right.
I say, imagine adding liquid to a garden and like how much of it just soaks in and is gone. With hydroponics, with a recirculating closed loop system, you don't run into any of that.
So, with that being said, I mean, that's like a real win, right? Especially in these environments where they don't want us to have grass, they want us to have things that are drought friendly. And so that would really facilitate people being able to grow and make fruits and vegetables, aside from root, more accessible. That's a really big win, right? So, how do you find that people are receiving that in areas like California with drought? What's the conversation around it?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Look, I've got family who lived in California and during kind of the water rationing. I don't know if it's still going on. And I remember how controversial it was that some people's lawns mysteriously kept surviving and other people's were letting theirs brown. So it's definitely it's part of the conversation. And I view it as an extension of, concern of where your food's coming from and where what's going into it. A lot of that's, concern for the environment and like are we going to be able to live in California in 50 years?
Right.
Right? Like you look at the Colorado River that's fed California, like the water levels that have gone down, and you look at the reservoir levels they talk about every summer, like how much water is going to be in there. It's interesting. The flip side of it is, the deserts of the far north, like the tundra, where you don't have access to a lot of fresh water because it's all frozen. Uh, it's the same thing as like how do we grow? How can we make growing your own food possible in environments where it normally wasn't? Or can we drastically lower the impact on whether that's on water use, fertilizer use, or even for people who are like out in the country where it's like you got to drive an hour to the grocery store, like that's a big impact that we can take away if we can allow you to grow your own food right at home, whether that's right in the kitchen or a container farm out back or a shed or what have you.
Right. And so I just like all of that sort of makes it tangible, right? Like you can imagine that, you can see growing it in your house, you can see the possibilities. And so I just want to go back because, as we think about eating locally and now we're growing anything and the idea of eating what is grown that is seasonal, they say is healthier for us. So while you can grow everything, you're not necessarily, are you advocating that people just grow whatever they want, or is part of the ethos to maintain things that are still seasonal, or do you not think it matters?
The seasonality and like what you're growing, it's very regional dependent. We have this conversation a lot in the States, because when we're dealing with somebody, customers in Missouri and Louisiana, like they've got a very different idea of what's seasonal, and that we're talking a lot of like collard greens, Swiss chard, kind of like hearty fiber stuff versus not to stereotype California, but like kale, just like love kale, like the kale trend never died.
Right.
And then we had the conversation with somebody in Alaska, and they're like, "What is seasonal produce? Like nothing's seasonal here." Uh, so there's all these different approaches to it. What we do advocate for is like grow what you're going to eat, and when we talk about the health impacts, one of the biggest things is actually having it fresh,
Hmm.
because the fresher the food, the more density the vitamins and the micronutrients are. So, you got to think as soon as you pick a plant, you're killing it, and you start to have that micronutrient breakdown right away. So it's the fresher the food, the better it is for you, and then grow what you're going to eat, and kind of have some fun with it. Because that's the other big thing is you can grow a lot of stuff you can't get at the grocery store. Like there's 200 different kinds of basil out in the world, but you're only going to find probably one or two on the grocery store shelves.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we grow Thai basil and regular basil and different herbs. Like I can't tell you how many different times we have, right? So it allows you to be creative and be fun and have all these different smells and create new kinds of recipes. So I'm enthusiastic about this as I come from an urban jungle and, the idea that you could do that. But I also really appreciate the impact you're having for on the environment, whether it's about travel and going to get food, whether it's about the machines that people are using. So I'd love to just dig a little further into that, understand that, how does this impact the farmer? How does this impact, uh, all the fruits and vegetables that we get from Mexico and everywhere else? And what is your overarching goal?
Yeah, I mean, for us, myself and my co-founder Kevin, we really started this through a sustainability lens. We met when we were doing our Masters of Science in Sustainability together, and Kevin was working in the far north in an indigenous community where, you know, a head of lettuce was $20 and it was already raw, right? Because it's like these are like places you can only fly in to get it, so it's like you're shipping stuff through the air. It's crazy, and it's we're sitting there saying like, okay, it's 2017 when we're starting this company. The world's got enough food. It's just how do we get it to people, and how do we get it to people in a way that's not going to kill the environment. So
Hmm.
for us, it's really that food impact sustainability mission. And when you look at the impact of your food, people are often surprised, like where the impact is, because it's we hear about food miles a lot, about food getting transported to grocery stores, which is true. But when you actually boil it down to the numbers, often there's actually more impact of you driving to the grocery store than the food getting there. Which, when you think about it, that truck is bringing in 100,000 heads of lettuce,
Right.
and your box of spinach went bad because you told yourself again, oh, I'll get through the box this week, and then you don't, because we've all been there, and you got to run to the store to get that spinach, and that one trip can have a big impact. And the other big thing is the packaging on the food. Like it's
Uh,
you go and buy, like, I'm making tacos tonight. I went and bought peppers, and like I don't put them in the little plastic bag that the person at the checkout did, like the single use bag. And I'm like, that might have more impact than the pepper itself. So by being able to, like, if we can save you a trip to the grocery store because your herbs are growing fresh and you're only picking what you need, and there's no plastic packaging around it, on top of your water savings and your fertilizer savings, you can make a real dent in your food impact in that part of your life. And not only do you get to eat better food, but you can feel good about it too.
So, if we want to circle back and talk about when you first kicked this off with your co-founder and you're in school and you're studying sustainability, why was this so meaningful to you?
Yeah, so I did, when I was in school, younger, more naive. I was like, put me in one of the biggest, baddest polluters, and I'll get this solved in 4 months. So I went to one of the largest agricultural companies in the world when they bought another one of the largest agricultural companies in the world that is also the most hated, whose name I'll leave out, but is pretty easily deducible for anyone in the space. And I saw firsthand how upset people were with the way they viewed food, whether it was factually correct or not. People were saying like, I wish I could grow my own food. I wish I knew what was going into it. I wish I had some control over it. And then Kevin at the same time was, like I said, he was in that far north community working there on how can we grow food in remote communities. And he said, like, look, the technology exists to do this. It's not anything revolutionary. It was just, in our view, nobody had dressed it up properly to make it palatable to your people in Toronto, New York, Montreal, LA. And that was the original thesis for the idea. It was like, can we build this into a cool piece of furniture where it's functional, it's cool, it's easy to use? Because when you say hydroponics, most people think like lights, tubes, like a grow up in your house. So
Right.
it's, how can we make this palatable for folks?
And when you first kicked this off, what was the response from, from buyers, from community members?
When we kicked it off, people were really enthusiastic, but they had not heard of vertical farming. It's kind of something you saw in the news once or twice. They didn't realize that it was something that could be done inside your home. So there's a lot of education with folks, but a lot of excitement. And the one thing I will say is, it's the younger generations always got it, and they were completely on board. I think there always has been a little bit of skepticism with some older folks around, just like, it's light, it's still like grow lights, it's still, you're putting stuff in the water. Like, we got to educate people. Is it nutritionally valuable? Is it safe? And of course, it all is. But you got to talk people through it and get them on board with it.
So what role did education play for you in kicking this off and, getting people committed to using this in their homes?
I mean, the amount of like workshops we've done around like planting seeds, here's how a plant grows, here's what it looks like, here's the differences. And as many workshops as I like to say I've done, what we found was the best people to teach is like, the people who took that initial dive, got a garden, and then you'll see like their friends come over for dinner and like, oh, what is that? Like, is that in here? And they've become our customers, have become our biggest advocates. We like to make sure they're equipped with the knowledge. We do a lot of work with universities and colleges to validate what we say because we don't want to just be, making things up, saying things. We want somebody else to validate it. But it's our customers who have been our biggest advocates for getting things done.
I mean, I know it's like the third party pitch, right? I mean, everybody can pitch something else that's not themselves better than people that pitch themselves. Um,
Yes. Oh,
it's so
absolutely.
genuine, right? Because people are really advocating and explaining why this idea, concept, product, person is the answer or is a great solution.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, obviously I've got a bias to sell it as somebody in the company, but it's like when it's your friend, your mom, your grandma, your uncle, or your cousin telling you about this, it's like, okay, I trust what they're saying. And this is one of the fun parts about us being like a food and a hardware product is the proof is like right there. Take a bite, it tastes good. You're like, all right, I bought it.
Right. And the other thing that I read, I think, that I thought was super interesting was the amount of water that you've saved by getting these products in people's homes. I think, did I read it was like 2.3 million liters or something?
Yeah, that itself is actually a little out of date. We're well above the 10 million liters saved now.
Oh my
So
God. Wow.
it's it's one of those things I joke, like, like I that's the one thing I can live guilt free on here. It's like I don't do this, don't advocate for it, but it's like if I forget to turn off the tap while I'm brushing my teeth, I'm like, okay, on balance, I think I've saved enough to take
Yeah,
care of that.
I think so. And I think equally, I read the number of miles that you saved in people commuting or, working on this. And I'm sure that this number may be out of date too, but I think at that point, when I did the research or when it was brought to my attention, it was like 112 million food miles. Is that right? Or is that really out
Yeah.
of date too?
Yeah, that's a little out of date. We're about 5 times that now. We haven't
Wow.
cracked the billion miles mark yet, but we're well on our way. And it's we do have some of the larger farms that contribute to this. Like it's everybody makes an impact. We got some farms that are growing 3,000, 10,000, 100,000 plants right in city centers,
Wow.
which can make a huge impact for those communities.
And so on in these farms that we're doing, that you would be doing inside people's homes or even in their gardens, my understanding is they're pesticide free, right? That's true. And so if
Yeah.
that's the case, I'd love to hear the statistics around the number of produce that you're producing or that are being produced by this that are pesticide free.
Yes, this is one of the really cool things about growing indoors is there's no pests, right? It's the worst things we like to say for your indoor garden at home are dogs and kids because they both like to go outside, roll around in the grass, and bring stuff back in. Um, but because there's no soil in it, right? It's just water fed. That takes away the main environment for pests to reproduce. So you don't have that. And then the other thing is because it's so you got anywhere from 12 to 88 plants is what most people are growing inside. It's pretty controllable, and if you see something, most of the time it's like spray it, get some eco-friendly dish soap, hot water, spray it on there, wipe it off, and you're good because you might get like aphids on there. But we don't use pesticides in 99.9% of situations here. So
So how did you like what inspired you to make that change since you're so comfortable with that and it seemed like it's something you liked, being an entrepreneur many times they say it's in your DNA or you got to have the bug or something. So it gave you the bug.
I always say when people ask me, like, should I get into entrepreneurship? I'm like, you got to be really ready to go through the ups and downs. And there's a lot of, high highs, but low lows.
Valleys.
It's a battle, and for me, I think what pushed it was the passion. Like it's the drive to make a difference in the food system, to feed people, and like we're incredibly proud of some of the food security projects we've done with food banks across Canada and the U.S. to, feeding refugees in the Ukrainian war. Like it's really like for me seeing that impact and seeing those changes has been the driver for sure.
A lot of times we have founders that are tuning in, and similar to you, maybe they got an idea from business school or something inspired them. But it's scary. It's scary to take that leap to go start a company. So I'd love you to just sort of walk us through that because, all of a sudden you're going from getting a paycheck to now being responsible to be taking care of people at some point. In the early stages, it's really just very scrappy and gritty, and you're trying to make all things work, and you don't have that life vest that you do when you're at a company. So, how did you come to resolve that for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I was fortunate that, coming out of grad school, I was used to living on a student salary. Because, it was like 2 years in grad school, you get back into the student mindset. Uh, but the biggest thing we always say is like, you got to just get out there and do it. You're not going to know until you've done it and you've tried it. So, we immediately started prototyping as fast as we could, and like the first units, like looking back, were kind of embarrassing, but you got to get out there and test the concept, test the idea, and start selling, because it's the amount of prospective entrepreneurs I talk to, like, I've got an idea, but I want to refine it, I want to make it perfect, I want to make it better. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be more work to do. Like, even today we say like our products aren't perfect. So it's get out there, start talking to people right away, and really start trying to sell your solution. And for a lot of people, they've got commitments where it's a family, a mortgage. It's, can you start it on the side? Can you try and ramp it up slowly? And then the other big thing I say, and we've taken venture capital money, like we've done the fundraising, but that's not necessary for every single business out there. Like, it's completely okay to have a small side hustle or a lifestyle business. Like, not everything needs to be millions or billions of dollars in value. Like, I think real impact comes from a lot of people doing small things right every single day.
And so, if you wanted to share with people how easy this is for them to implement, could you give us like three things they need to know so that they're like, I can do this too?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of starting to be an entrepreneur, it's as easy as take the idea out of your head, put it on paper, put it out in the world, talk to somebody about it, see what they have to say, and gauge the reaction, readjust, and and keep going. So it's as easy as you got to get out there, take that first small risk. I find most things are a lot scarier. The idea of it is scarier than actually doing it. So take it a little bite-sized chunks. You don't need to do everything all at once. Like, just do it little by little, and before you know it, you'll have that momentum rolling, and you'll have something started up.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know what your experience is on this, but everybody makes mistakes. And
Oh,
are there any mistakes you've made that maybe, ultimately were a good thing because if you didn't make that mistake, you wouldn't have found the right answer?
oh, 100%. Like, we make mistakes all the time, whether it's something simple like forgetting to send a follow-up email, to like we've made some pretty drastic mistakes on like hardware selection, like nothing dangerous, but things that have like cost real dollars have slowed us down. And it's, the mistake is valuable if you can accept you've made it, know how to fix it, and reflect like, okay, what came out of this? Because a lot of the time, like, you get happy mistakes sometimes, like you said, where it's like, oh, I got the wrong part and I put it in here, but like, actually that's given me an idea and we kind of stumbled onto something else. And that's kind of how our commercial arm of the business was born. It was like, we were ripping apart some consumer units, and somebody looked at it and said, yeah, if I could have those parts and put like 10 of them together, like, I would love that. Like, I could have a whole wall that produces 10 times as much. I was like, man, why aren't we doing that? So it was, you do find those happy mistakes. And I say I was ripping this apart because there was a malfunction in that machine that we sold to them. So you get happy mistakes all the time.
Yeah, and I think mistakes they are really part of the journey, right? They can be
Yes.
frustrating, they can be expensive, they can be a time delay, but they can also end up leading you somewhere you might not have otherwise been or gone to. So if we're looking forward and we're looking at, your company, the industry, agriculture, all of it, accessibility to food, can you maybe give us or share with us what impact you hope to have on the future of food?
Yeah, for us, we want to make sure that everybody, no matter where you live, has access to their own source of fresh food and that it's affordable. Like we've lived, like we said, through a time where the price of food came down for about 50 years straight. Then the last 10 years, it started going the other way really quickly. So it's, we're not a silver bullet solution to everything, but it's, okay, how can we help stabilize the food system and give it some resiliency where it's, we want to make sure if there's a drought in California or hurricanes hit the East Coast that we're not all of a sudden not able to eat lettuce. Like it's how can we add that resiliency? How can we make that food affordable for folks again? And especially in those communities where it typically might not be available, whether that's your urban jungle in downtown New York or Kodiak, Alaska, where there is no such thing as seasonal vegetables.
People listening to this episode, I can imagine them saying, okay, so how do I get this? What do I do next? Can you maybe talk to that person that's asking, that's curious about how to get this going in their kitchen?
Yeah, so it's super easy. The gardens in your kitchen, they're about 9 inches deep, so less than a foot deep. All you need is a single electrical outlet to plug them in. And and then the water is self-contained, so you just fill it up with a jug or bring it to your tap. And we'd like to say, we've got people who used to kill cactuses who are now successful growers. So it is built to be as easy as possible. And we ship direct to people's doors. It's fully assembled. You're up and running in under 15 minutes.
Okay, and what's the price point for this?
Yeah, so our gardens range from $4.99 up to if you're building a full scale vertical farm, they can go into the millions of dollars for the commercial builds. But they start at $4.99, and the really cool thing we do with all our consumer gardens is we give you all the supplies you need in the box when you buy it to grow the value of the garden back. So you'll grow at least that much value back in produce before you need to spend another dollar reordering.
So for those listeners that tuned in today, that listened to the whole episode, whether they're watching it on the video cast on YouTube or whether they're listening to it on Spotify, if they've tuned in and listened to the whole episode, is there any special discount we can give to our loyal Essential Ingredients listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to the website, www.justvertical.com. And at checkout, you can put in the code ESSENTIAL, and that will give you 10% off the entire order, no matter how big it is.
Great. Connor, thank you so much for joining me today. I know that it was an education for me, an ability to learn how to bring that garden inside and make those vegetables accessible, even when living in an urban jungle, which, I've often wondered about because mine is right outside my back door. But growing up in New York, I don't see how easy it is there. And now with this solution, with Just Vertical, it seems like everyone gets to be a gardener. Everyone can eat locally sourced, healthy, pesticide-free, organic fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. We love telling the story and just getting the word out that people do have a way to grow their own food.
So I want to thank our listeners and our viewers for tuning in today. It's always great to be surrounded by my friends and my community, to hear what our founders are sharing with us so that we can make more informed choices. If you have additional questions or you want to learn more, Connor, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out all our info at www.justvertical.com. You want to see a commercial solution, commercial.justvertical.com. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, ctidd@justvertical.com. We're always happy to chat, connect with like-minded folks, and work our way to a better world together.
And you know what I want to hear? I want to hear those folks that tuned in today that go and get the vertical farm. And I want to hear how it's working for you. I want to hear, is it easy? Was it easy to set up? How long does it take for everything to grow? And we want to hear from you so that we can share those stories here so people can better understand the vertical garden wherever you live. Thanks again, Connor.
Thank you.